The man known to history as Marshal Ney was born Michel Ney on the 10th of January 1769 in Saint-Louis, a fortress town on France's northeastern frontier in what is now part of Germany. His father, Peter Ney, who is also known by his French name of Pierre, was born in 1738 in the village of Ensdorf on the right bank of the river Saar, opposite Saint-Louis. Although the inhabitants of Saint-Louis were typically ethnic German, since 1680 when King Louis XIV of France asked his military engineer Marshal Vauban to fortify the townsfolk had become patriotic Frenchmen. During the late 1750s, Pierre Ney fought as a soldier in the French army during the 7 Years' War against King Frederick the Great of Prussia, before returning to Saint-Louis after the war and becoming a master cooper making barrels. Michel's mother was Margarita Grieveldinger from the town of Budingen in central Germany. In January 1767, Pierre Ney married Margarita, and later that year the couple had their first child, a son named Jean. Following the birth of Michel in 1769, the couple had 4 more children, of whom only one, a daughter born in 1772, named Margarita, survived into adulthood. The Ney children grew up speaking German at home and learned French at school. Michel's elder brother Jean was expected to take over the family business, while Michel was intended for a career in the law. He received an education at a local school run by the monastic order of St. Augustine before graduating in 1782 at the age of 13, when he was apprenticed as a clerk to the chief notary of Saint-Louis. By 1784, the 15-year-old Michel Ney was working as a junior clerk for the royal prosecutor in the town. The teenager did not enjoy his desk job, and a few months later his father allowed him to find work at the mines and ironworks at Oppenweiler near Stuttgart. After 3 years working as an assistant to the superintendent of the ironworks, he returned to his parents at Saint-Louis. More than anything else, Michel Ney wanted to be a soldier, and on the 12th of February 1787, he joined a regiment of hussars based in the city of Metz, around 30 miles to the southwest of Saint-Louis. Hussars were a branch of the cavalry, inspired by the Hungarian light horsemen who specialized in fast charges on the battlefield and raiding and scouting during campaigns. The hussars wore bright, colorful uniforms and were armed with a curved saber and a small rifle called a carbine. The 18-year-old Ney was above average height and was distinguished by his red hair, earning him the nickname Le Rougeau, or red-faced. At camp he proved to be a good soldier and an excellent swordsman, but his prospects for promotion in the French Royal Army were limited. Officers in the French army had to be aristocrats for at least 2 generations. Ney, who had no noble blood whatsoever, was excluded. Ney's prospects of promotion changed significantly within 3 years of his joining the army. In the late 1780s, the French state, which was on the verge of bankruptcy as a result of King Louis XVI's military expenditures, frantically sought to raise taxes. In 1789, Louis summoned the Estates General, the dormant political body bringing together the 3 feudal estates, the church, the aristocracy, and the commoners. As the 3 estates deliberated over how they would make decisions, the 3rd estate, that of the commoners, declared themselves to be the National Assembly on the 20th of June, claiming the right to represent the nation as a whole. The men of the National Assembly favored increasing political and civil liberties for the people, and a constitutional government with the king sharing power with the National Assembly as representatives of the people. On the 14th of July, a revolutionary mob stormed the Bastille fortress in Paris, a notorious royal prison, striking a decisive blow against royal authority. Within days, the king was forced to accept the authority of the National Assembly, and in August the Assembly abolished feudalism and aristocratic privileges. The French Revolution of 1789 thus opened up the higher ranks in the military to commoners like Ney, and on New Year's Day 1791 he was promoted to the rank of corporal. In June 1791, after spending 2 years effectively under house arrest, In the palace of the Tuileries, King Louis and Queen Marie Antoinette attempted to escape in disguise to the Austrian Netherlands, in what is today modern Belgium, a territory which was ruled by Marie Antoinette's brother Leopold II, who ruled over large parts of Germany as the Holy Roman Emperor. The royal party was recognized at Varennes, around 30 miles from the border, and was taken back to Paris under arrest. The plight of the French king and queen increased the possibility of war between revolutionary France and the crowned heads of Europe, who debated whether to rescue Louis and Marie Antoinette and restore them to the throne and their absolute power. The increased prospect for war prompted a call for volunteers from the voluntary government in Paris, and Ney's brother Jean signed up as a national volunteer. A few weeks later, their mother died on the 4th of November in Saint-Louis. By the time Austria and France went to war in May 1792, the 23-year-old Michel Ney had been promoted to regimental sergeant major. Ney's regiment, the 5th Hussars, was under the command of Colonel François Lamarche, and in July, Ney was promoted to adjutant and served on Lamarche's staff. By mid-August, the 5th Hussars were part of the Army of the North, under General Charles de Maurier. This army was tasked with stopping the enemy advance on Paris. On the 20th of September, the French under de Maurier and General François Kellermann confronted the enemy, led by the Duke of Brunswick at Valmy, around 100 miles east of Paris. Brunswick believed that it would be easy to break through the French army of conscripts and volunteers, but instead was faced with a forceful French artillery barrage. While Brunswick chose to retreat, Ney became a commissioned officer for the first time as a sub-lieutenant. Ney and his comrades followed up this victory by marching into the Austrian Netherlands, where on the 6th of November he fought at Jemappes, enabling de Maurier to occupy Brussels. In the meantime, the radical Jacobin faction took power in Paris, and on the 21st of January 1793, King Louis XVI was executed at the guillotine, prompting Britain and the Netherlands to join the war against France. When the Austrians marched on Brussels in March, Ney served as an aide-de-camp to Le Manche, now a general, who led de Maurier's vanguard of 6,000 men. At Gossencourt on the 16th of March, Ney led the 5th Hussars in a charge against the retreating Austrians and took numerous prisoners. However, de Maurier was defeated at Neerwinden on the 28th of March, resulting in the French withdrawal from the Low Countries. The defeated commander feared arrest and defected to the Austrians, a major blow to the French. Following the defection, the French army was reorganized, with Ney's 5th Hussars becoming the 4th Hussars. Ney continued his rapid rise in the military leadership, becoming a lieutenant in October and a captain the following April, where he led a company of around 100 men. In the early summer of 1794, the French general Jean-Baptiste Jourdan defeated the Austrians at the Battle of Fleurus, enabling the French to recapture the Low Countries. Ney's hussars were part of General Jean-Baptiste Kleber's left wing during the battle, and after coming to Kleber's attention for his tactical insight, Ney joined Kleber's staff in July. Under Kleber, Ney led a small cavalry force to keep order and protect the army's supply columns. On the 30th of July, after leading this small force on a victorious charge against an enemy squadron of some 200 troopers, Ney was promoted to staff major. In late August, Ney led a raid on the enemy supply train near Maastricht, when he was surrounded by 3 groups of enemy cavalry. Ney courageously charged against the horsemen in front of him and successfully broke through and even captured the enemy cavalry commander, an exploit that won him promotion to colonel. As Jourdan and Kleber continued to advance against the Austrians in late September, Ney worked closely with Kleber's vanguard commander, General Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who was impressed with Ney's bravery and intelligence and became a close friend of the rising star. By the beginning of October, the French armies had taken control of the left bank of the Rhine, and at the beginning of November, Ney helped secure the surrender of Maastricht, which had continued to hold out against the French forces. In December 1794, during the siege of Mayence, Better known by its German name, Mainz, Ney was severely wounded in the arm and returned to his hometown, which had been renamed Saar-Libre following the revolution. In February 1795, he re-entered the army, now attached to the headquarters of General Jourdan, commander of the army of the Sambre and Meuse. The 1795 campaign proved less successful than that of the previous year, as Jourdan's attempt to cross the Rhine to facilitate the siege of Mayence was beaten back by the Austrians. While an armistice held between the French and the Austrians on the Rhine, in early 1796 the 26-year-old General Napoleon Bonaparte was winning a string of victories against the Austrians in northern Italy. In May, hostilities recommenced at the Rhine. While Jourdan commanded the French left, the right wing was led by General Jean-Victor Marie Moreau, commander of the Army of the Rhine. The Austrian commander was Archduke Charles, younger brother of Emperor Francis II, and one of the most talented generals of the day. In June, Jourdan's army faced stiff resistance from Charles, and Ney was involved in covering the retreat. But after Moreau advanced in July, Charles pulled back, allowing Jourdan to regain the initiative. Ney commanded Jourdan's cavalry, and on the 7th of August, his exploits in the capture of the fortress of Forchheim won him promotion to brigadier general. Thus, the son of a cooper from Saint-Louis had risen to the rank of general at the age of 27, a mere 8 years after joining the army. Not long after these successes, Jourdan suffered a series of setbacks against Archduke Charles, following which Ney led the rearguard in heavy and desperate fighting. In September, Jourdan resigned his command and another truce was agreed. Following an uneventful winter, General Lazare Hoche took command of the army of the Sambre and Meuse in February 1797. Although only 29 years old, Hoche was considered one of the army's brightest stars, alongside Bonaparte, who had added to his list of victories by capturing the Austrian garrison at Mantua in early February, before marching across the foothills of the Alps into Austria itself. By the end of March, Bonaparte was at Klagenfurt in southern Austria and threatening to march on the Austrian capital of Vienna. In mid-April, Hoche was instructed to continue the campaign on the Rhine against a weakened Austrian army. During Hoche's victory at the Battle of Neuwied on the 18th of April, Ney was leading his Hussar division when he was counterattacked by Austrian cavalry and taken prisoner. The following day, news arrived that Bonaparte had agreed preliminary peace terms with Archduke Charles at Leoben, bringing an end to hostilities. Hoche helped to negotiate Ney's exchange for an Austrian general, allowing Ney to return to his division in early June. The agreement at Leoben was confirmed by the Peace of Campo Formio in November 1797, leaving Britain the remaining power that was still at war with France. Bonaparte planned to lead an invasion of Britain, and an army of England was being organized at Amiens, where Ney arrived in March 1798 with 2 Hussar regiments. After a few weeks, the French government decided that an invasion of England was unlikely to succeed, and dispatched Bonaparte to Egypt instead. Ney spent the rest of the year transferring between various peacetime assignments. In early 1799, as the threat of renewed hostilities with Austria increased, Ney was assigned to the vanguard of General Jourdan's army of the Danube, which crossed the Rhine into the upper Danube Valley in southern Germany. Soon after the outbreak of the war in March, Ney joined Bernadotte in capturing Mannheim on the eastern bank of the Rhine, for which he was promoted to General of Division. By the time Ney received his promotion in May, a combined army of the Danube and Switzerland was formed under the command of André Massena, who had served as a capable second-in-command during Bonaparte's Italian campaign. In the meantime, General Alexander Suvorov had arrived in northern Italy with 40,000 Russian troops to reinforce the Austrians, pushing the French westwards along the valley of the River Po. On the 26th of May, Ney assumed command of Massena's advance guard at Winterthur to the northeast of Zurich. On the 27th, Ney led 4,000 men towards the enemy, but soon found himself confronting an Austrian force around 4 times the size of his own. Ney led a fighting retreat back to Winterthur, during which he was wounded twice and had 2 horses killed from under him. After almost 2 months recovering from his wounds, Ney joined Massena in Basel on the 22nd of July, where he took command of the 6th Infantry Division. In the meantime, the situation on the Italian front had deteriorated, as Suvorov defeated General MacDonald at the Battle of Trebia in mid-June, where Ney's elder brother Jean was killed. While Suvorov captured the fortresses of Alessandria and Mantua in northern Italy in July, Massena and Charles were observing an unofficial truce in the Upper Danube. This truce was briefly broken on the 17th of August, when Ney managed to beat back a sustained Austrian attack at Klein-Dettingen. A few days later, Ney was transferred to the headquarters of the Army of the Rhine in Mannheim, but was unable to achieve much under the command of the uninspiring General Leonhard Müller. While Ney and his men struggled to make progress in Germany, further bad news arrived from Italy, when on the 15th of August, Suvorov defeated General Barthélemy Joubert's army of Italy at the Battle of Novi, during which the French commander was killed. By early September, Suvorov was leading his 30,000 Russians over the Alps into Switzerland to support the Russian corps led by Alexander Korsakov in Zurich and take the fight to Massena. On the Rhine, Ney was on the defensive while the Austrian vanguard under Prince Karl von Schwarzenberg occupied the eastern bank of the river. On the 18th of September, the Austrians captured Mannheim and Müller ordered Ney to withdraw further from the Rhine. On the 24th of September, the incompetent Müller was dismissed and recalled to Paris, and Ney was appointed to take his place as Commander-in-Chief of the Army of the Rhine. Ney agreed to accept the post on a temporary basis for 10 days and immediately set about reorganizing the army by maintaining a line of garrisons along the Rhine, while keeping a small active force to resist any attempted crossings. At the end of September, Ney received news of Massena's victory over Korsakov at the Battle of Zurich and decided to go on the offensive to harass the Austrians and prevent them from concentrating under Archduke Charles. Shortly before handing over command to General Claude Lecourbe, Ney recaptured Mannheim and Heidelberg on the 17th of October, regaining what Müller had lost a month earlier. At the end of August 1799, General Bonaparte returned to France from Egypt. Since landing in Egypt the previous July, Bonaparte had swiftly taken control of Egypt, but the defeat of the French fleet by British Admiral Horatio Nelson at the Nile on the 1st of August left him cut off from France. Napoleon's Army of the Orient marched into Syria to confront the armies of the Ottoman Empire, but was unable to capture the fortress of Acre on the Mediterranean coast. After abandoning the siege in May 1799, Bonaparte returned to Egypt, where he learned of the French defeats in Italy. On the 24th of August, he set sail from Alexandria and left General Kleber in charge. He believed that he had to take charge of the government to restore French fortunes, and after his arrival in Paris, he happily joined a plot planned by Abbé Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, a cleric and politician who had been instrumental in asserting the rights of the Third Estate during the Revolution of 1789. On the 9th of November 1799, Bonaparte overthrew the Directory and established himself as first consul of the French Republic. Bonaparte's coup was enthusiastically welcomed by Ney and his fellow officers in the French army. Following a sustained Austrian counter-offensive which began at the end of November, the Army of the Rhine was forced to evacuate the east bank of the river. Bonaparte was already making plans for the campaign in 1800. Napoleon consolidated the French armies in Germany and created a 140,000-strong Army of the Rhine under General Moreau in southern Germany and Switzerland. Ney commanded some 10,000 men of the 1st Division under the direct command of General Laurent Gouvion-Saint-Cyr, the commander of Moreau's centre. Ney's division served as the advance guard and crossed the Rhine on the 25th of April 1800. The Austrian commander-in-chief, Paul Kray, had around 100,000 men under arms and fell back to the city of Ulm in Bavaria. While Moreau pursued the retreating Austrians, On the 6th of May, Ney attacked the Austrians at Sigmaringen on the Danube and took almost 2,000 prisoners. While Moreau was advancing in Germany, Bonaparte led his army of reserve into Italy, striking at the rear of General Michael von Mellas's Austrians, who were then besieging Massena in Genoa, the last remaining French foothold in Italy. Although Massena was obliged to withdraw from Genoa on the 4th of June, he had won enough time for Napoleon to surprise the Austrians by crossing the Alps. On the 14th of June 1800, Bonaparte met Melas in battle at Marengo near Alessandria. The Austrians were making steady progress throughout the day against Bonaparte's men before General Louis Desaix arrived on the scene with 6,000 men and turned the tide of the battle, though Desaix lost his life in the process. That same day in faraway Egypt, Ney's friend and former commander, General Kleber, was assassinated by a student in Cairo. Back in Germany, Moreau reorganized his army at the end of May, and Ney now led General Grenier's 2nd Division on the army's left wing. In June and July, Ney was at the forefront of the action, as Moreau forced Kray to retreat down the Danube. On the 15th of July, an armistice was signed, while peace talks were taking place between France and Austria. The Austrians refused to accept Bonaparte's terms and hostilities recommenced in November. Kray had been replaced by the 18-year-old Archduke John, the youngest brother of Emperor Francis. The inexperienced Archduke was assisted by his chief of staff, Colonel Franz von Weyrother, who advised a flank march to cut off Moreau's communications. The army's slow progress prompted John to decide on an immediate attack on Munich, and on the 1st of December, the Austrians attacked Grenier's corps at Ampfing, northeast of Munich. Though Ney managed to lead a successful counterattack, the arrival of Austrian reinforcements forced Grenier to fall back. Moreau awaited the Austrian attack at Hohenlinden, around 20 miles to the east of Munich. The French commander anticipated that the main enemy attack would be directed along the road towards Hohenlinden and planned for Ney to attack the main enemy column supported by General Emmanuel de Grouchy's division. The Austrians attacked on the morning of the 3rd, and by 7 o'clock in the morning, Ney was in action, successfully repulsing the enemy attack with help from Grouchy and General Jean-Joseph d'Hautpoul's reserve cavalry. Ney and Grouchy then launched a bayonet attack against the main Austrian column, forcing them to retreat along the main road. The two French divisions continued to advance against the Austrians through the woods to the east of Hohenlinden, while another French division struck at the Austrian left flank. By the end of the day, the Austrians lost more than 5,000 men, killed and wounded, and more than 7,000 prisoners. On Christmas Day 1800, an armistice was agreed between Moreau and Archduke Charles, who had taken command of the retreating Austrian army. The peace negotiations resumed, and in February 1801, the Peace of Lunéville was agreed. Ney returned to France in April and spent the rest of the year at his country house near Nancy, called La Petite Malgrange, where he was reunited with his father Pierre and his sister Margarita. Although Ney had served on the Rhine and never met the first consul, Bonaparte seemed to hold Ney in high regard and invited him to Paris in May 1801. In November, Ney was appointed Inspector General of the Cavalry, which he accepted at the beginning of 1802, after some hesitation. While Napoleon had plans for Ney in the army, his wife, Josephine de Beauharnais, intended to set him up with the 20-year-old Aglaé Louise Aguillet, a close friend of her daughter, Hortense de Beauharnais. Though Ney had failed to make a good impression when he first met Aglaé in February, the couple were married on the 5th of August 1802. Though Ney would spend a long time away from home on campaign, he remained devoted to his wife, and the couple would later have 4 sons. Within 2 months of moving to La Petite Malgrange with his new bride, Ney was ordered to go to Geneva, then a French city, to await instructions for a mission to Switzerland. The country was the scene of regular fighting between the Helvetic Republic, set up by the French Revolutionary armies in 1798, with its capital in Bern, and the Swiss cantons, which during the French Revolution had lost their ancient privileges. Following an uprising in 1802, Ney was tasked with restoring order in Switzerland. He successfully captured Zurich by the end of October. On the 19th of February 1803, the Helvetic Republic was abolished in favor of a Swiss confederation that was closely aligned with France, and in July the two countries signed a treaty of alliance under which the Swiss agreed to supply 16,000 men to the French army. After accomplishing his task in Switzerland, Ney received new orders and returned to France in January 1804. The first consul had signed a peace with Britain at Amiens in March 1802, but the two sides were at war again in May 1803. Bonaparte began to organize another Army of England, which would serve as the key force in his planned invasion across the English Channel. 172,000 men were gathered in camps around the port of Boulogne on the coast of northern France. These men were organized into permanent army corps, each of which contained its own infantry, cavalry, and artillery units. Ney was given command of 20,000 men, who formed the 6th Corps on the extreme left, encamped near the village of Étaples, with its headquarters at Montreuil. By the time he was supervising the training and military exercises of the men at Boulogne, the 36-year-old General Michel Ney had spent almost half his life in military uniform. He had been a general for a decade, during which he developed a reputation as a brave and intelligent leader during several seasons of campaigning against the Austrians in Germany, and had played a leading role in Moreau's brilliant victory at Hohenlinden. He successfully carried out a mission for the first consul in Switzerland and was happily married to a close friend of the Bonaparte family. Despite all he had achieved, his greatest glory as a military commander was yet to come. On the 18th of May 1804, First Consul Napoleon Bonaparte was proclaimed Napoleon I, Emperor of the French, an announcement that was enthusiastically welcomed in Boulogne. The following day, the Emperor revived the rank of Marshal of France and awarded the honor to 18 of his officers. The list was headed by Louis-Alexandre Berthier, Napoleon's chief of staff, and included Jourdan, Bernadotte Masséna, and Ney himself. After attending Napoleon's coronation in Paris on the 2nd of December 1804, Ney returned to Montreuil in February 1805, where preparations for the invasion of England increased in intensity. Napoleon devised a plan for Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve to evade Nelson's fleet by heading for the West Indies before turning around and heading to the English Channel, to give Napoleon the window he needed to ferry his Army of England across the Channel. By early summer, Villeneuve was back in European waters, while Nelson was still in the Caribbean. After clashing with Admiral Robert Calder's fleet off Cape Finisterre in northern Spain, Villeneuve decided to seek refuge in the Spanish port of Cadiz, spoiling Napoleon's plans. Having lost his window of opportunity to cross the Channel, Napoleon ordered the army to break camp on the 27th of August. Admiral Nelson's destruction of Villeneuve's Franco-Spanish fleet at Trafalgar on the 21st of October 1805 further ensured that a French invasion of England could not take place. While Napoleon had been planning to invade England, British Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger was seeking allies to join the war against France. By August 1805, the Third Coalition was formed, with Britain, Austria, and Russia as the leading powers. The main Allied armies consisted of 150,000 Austrians under Archduke Charles, who were assigned to strike against Napoleon's Kingdom of Italy. Another force of 60,000 Austrians and 70,000 Russians were to march on the Rhine. Rather than waiting for General Mikhail Kutuzov's Russians to arrive, the 60,000 Austrians decided to march into Germany to subdue Napoleon's Bavarian allies. Though nominally commanded by Archduke Ferdinand, another of Emperor Francis's brothers, Chief of Staff General Karl Mack was effectively in charge of the operation. While Mack concentrated his army around Ulm, awaiting Kutuzov's arrival, Napoleon planned to march 150,000 men of his renamed Grande Armée, or Great Army, to defeat Mack at Ulm before the Russians arrived. In the meantime, Masséna was stationed in northern Italy with 50,000 men, with instructions to keep Archduke Charles busy. Ney was ordered to lead his 6th Corps to the Rhine and arrived 3 weeks later after a 350-mile march. He had on his staff a young Swiss officer named Antoine-Henri de Jomini, who would later become one of the two leading military theorists of the age. Napoleon ordered Marshal Joachim Murat, his cavalry commander and brother-in-law, to make a demonstration to the west of Ulm, while the Grande Armée rapidly wheeled around to the north to threaten Mack's rear from the east. The French advanced rapidly as each corps marched on different roads, converging on Ulm. Ney's 6th Corps crossed the Rhine on the 27th of September and reached Stuttgart 3 days later. By the 3rd of October, the Grande Armée began wheeling south towards the Danube, downriver from Ulm. It was only on the 5th that Mack discovered the enemy was to his east, but an attempt to break out north faced opposition from Ney on the 9th of October. Acting on Murat's orders, Ney continued to march south, but on the 11th, his 1st Division under General Dupont was attacked by Mack and was forced to fall back. As Mack prepared to break out to the northeast, Napoleon ordered Ney to attack the Austrian vanguard at Elchingen. On the 14th, Ney personally led his corps into the fray, and despite some fierce resistance, the Austrians fell back towards Ulm in the early afternoon. Napoleon honored Ney's victory by granting him the title Duke of Elchingen. By the 16th of October, Ulm was surrounded by the Grande Armée, and on the 19th, Mack agreed to surrender. Almost the entire Austrian army had been eliminated from the equation, with hardly any bloodshed, with only a few thousand Austrians able to withdraw eastwards and join up with Kutuzov's approaching Russians. While Ney remained in Ulm, some of his men were detached to join Napoleon's main army, leaving him with fewer than 10,000 men. Napoleon pursued Kutuzov as the latter retreated along the Danube to join up with Russian reinforcements under General Fyodor Buxhoeveden. After occupying Vienna, Napoleon defeated the combined Austro-Russian army at Austerlitz on the 2nd of December. Ney had played no part at Austerlitz and had been fighting an Austrian army of 20,000 in the mountainous region of the Tyrol instead. On the 26th of December, the Treaty of Pressburg was signed in what is now the Slovakian capital of Bratislava, leading to Austria's withdrawal from the anti-Napoleonic coalition. The Kingdom of Prussia in northern Germany had stayed out of the war in 1805, but the Prussian court was anxious about Napoleon's ambitions in Germany and was split on whether to support or oppose him. By the late summer of 1806, the Prussians were preparing to go to war, and Napoleon mobilized his Grande Armée to confront them. Like the Austrians in 1805, the Prussians went on the offensive without waiting for their Russian allies to arrive and began concentrating in Saxony in southeast Germany. Napoleon decided to march on Saxony in a square order of battle, with 5th and 7th Corps on the left, the 1st and 3rd Corps and the Imperial Guard in the center, with Marshal Jean Soult's 4th Corps leading Ney's 6th Corps on the right. Each corps was one day's march away from its nearest neighbor, ensuring that any corps that confronted the enemy could fight a holding battle, with the knowledge that they would receive help within a day from the other corps. After the first clashes on the 9th of October, by the 13th, Ney received orders from Napoleon to concentrate on Jena, where Napoleon expected to find the main Prussian army of 60,000 men under the Duke of Brunswick, but which was in fact a smaller Prussian army under Prince Hohenlohe. On the morning of the 14th, Lannes drove back the leading Prussians, while Ney and 6th Corps were still marching towards Jena. Keen to join in the fray, Ney defied the Emperor's orders and led his advance force of around 3,000 men into the attack to the left of Lannes. Ney's small force pushed forwards and were briefly isolated, facing a strong enemy counterattack, forcing him to form his infantry into squares to repel enemy cavalry charges. After desperate fighting, Lannes and Soult advanced on either side and renewed the attack. It was only at the end of the day, when the Prussians were in full retreat, that the rest of Ney's corps arrived on the field. Late in the day, Napoleon received a report from Marshal Louis-Nicolas Davout of 3rd Corps announcing that his single corps had defeated an enemy force of some 60,000 men at Auerstedt to the north of Jena. It was only then that Napoleon realized that Davout had been fighting Brunswick's main army. For the remainder of the month, Ney's relatively fresh corps joined Murat in pursuing the enemy and in capturing isolated Prussian garrisons. Their forces forced the surrender of Erfurt and Magdeburg at the beginning of November. With the Russians now on the move, Napoleon intended to continue eastwards to subdue the Prussian garrisons in East Prussia and meet the Russians in battle. As Ney marched across Poland, in late December, Lannes engaged General Levin August Bennigsen's Russian army in an indecisive battle at Pultusk in East Prussia, now northeastern Poland. By January 1807, Ney's corps had been reduced to 10,000 men as a result of attrition, and the men found it difficult to keep themselves supplied during the winter. Acting without orders, Ney moved his corps to the north, seeking fresh provisions and with an eye to marching on Königsberg, now the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, where Prussian King Frederick William III had taken refuge. A furious Napoleon reprimanded Ney for placing Bernadotte's First Corps in danger from Bennigsen. The Russians took the offensive and forced Bernadotte to withdraw from Mohrungen on the 25th of January. During the first week of February, Ney was on the French left, opposite General Anton Wilhelm von Lestock's 10,000 Prussians. On the 8th of February, Bennigsen's 60,000 men took up a defensive position to the northeast of the town of Eylau, preparing to do battle with Napoleon. The Emperor had little more than 40,000 and hurriedly ordered Davout to join him on the right and Ney on the left. Ney did not receive his orders until mid-morning, when the Battle of Eylau was already raging. Marshal Pierre Augereau's 7th Corps lost its way in a snowstorm and was cut down by Russian guns. In order to gain time to reorganize his line, Napoleon ordered Murat to launch a cavalry charge, which proved far more successful than anticipated. Towards the end of the day, Lestock's Prussians entered the fray and shifted the momentum in Bennigsen's favor, but Ney arrived on the field at around 7 in the evening, and Bennigsen withdrew from the field during the night. Both sides suffered more than 20,000 casualties in the indecisive battle. After examining the corpses strewn over the battlefield the following morning, Ney remarked, "What a massacre, and all to no purpose." For the next 4 months, both armies maneuvered against each other without any serious fighting. The Grande Armée was steadily receiving reinforcements, and Ney's corps was back to its full strength of 20,000 men. Recognizing Napoleon's superiority in numbers, Bennigsen remained on the defensive. After a winter of indecisive action and under pressure from his subordinates to take the offensive, Bennigsen targeted Ney's 6th Corps at the beginning of June. On the 5th and 6th of June, Ney fought a rearguard action at Gutstadt, which limited the Russian advance to 10 miles, at the cost of 2,000 casualties, giving Napoleon time to concentrate his forces. A French attack on the strong Russian position at Heilsberg on the 10th proved extremely costly, but led Bennigsen to retreat towards Königsberg. Lannes led the pursuit and arrived at the Aller River at Friedland. On the morning of the 14th of June, the 7th anniversary of the Battle of Marengo, Bennigsen recrossed the Aller and attacked Lannes' isolated corps, while Napoleon brought up 3 additional corps and the Imperial Guard. Deployed on the French right, Ney launched the decisive attack on the Russian left under Prince Piotr Bagration, forcing the Russians into a rout and fighting his way into the burning town. Following his defeat at Friedland, Bennigsen retreated to the river Niemen, the border between East Prussia and the Russian Empire. Tsar Alexander sued for peace, and in early July, Russia and France signed the Treaty of Tilsit, ending the War of the Fourth Coalition. Having defeated and made peace with the Austrians, Prussians, and Russians within the space of a year and a half, Napoleon turned his attention back to Britain. As he could not invade England, the Emperor turned to economic warfare, and in November 1806 he issued the Berlin Decree, which established the Continental System. This system was intended to blockade British trade with the European continent. After Tilsit, most of the European continent had joined the Continental blockade, with only Sweden and Portugal outside of the coalition. While asking his new Russian ally to take care of Sweden, in November 1807, Napoleon sent a small army under General Jean-Andoche Junot to invade Portugal. Although Junot quickly occupied the country and forced the Portuguese court to flee to Brazil, a British army landed in early August 1808, and British forces, led by General Sir Arthur Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, defeated Junot at Vimiero on the 21st of August. Under the terms of the Convention of Sintra on the 30th of August, Junot was forced to leave Portugal, enabling the British to assume control of the kingdom. In the meantime, Napoleon used the invasion of Portugal to establish a strong military presence in Spain. Napoleon placed his elder brother Joseph as King of Spain in July 1808 and anticipated that it would be straightforward to subdue the Spanish rebels. When General Dupont and his 17,000 men were forced to surrender to a Spanish army at Belen on the 19th of July, Napoleon responded by sending some of his most experienced veterans to Spain, including Ney's 6th Corps. The Emperor took command of the army himself, and his armies reoccupied Madrid at the beginning of December. While Spanish armies were defeated one by one, the British contingent of 20,000 men, under General Sir John Moore, marched from Portugal into the Spanish heartland in an effort to rally Spanish support. By late December, Moore realized that Napoleon was leading 50,000 men against him and began to retreat towards the port of Coruña in northern Spain, from where he could evacuate his army. Ney accompanied Napoleon in the pursuit of Moore, but at the beginning of January 1809, Napoleon decided to return to Paris, following rumors of a plot against him, leaving Marshal Soult to continue operations against Moore. Soult decided to continue the pursuit alone and ordered Ney to pacify the province of Galicia in northwestern Spain. On the 16th of January, Moore was killed while fighting a rearguard action covering the successful evacuation of his men from Coruña. By the middle of 1809, Napoleon was once again in the Danube Valley, fighting the Austrians under Archduke Charles. The marshals in Spain were nominally under the command of King Joseph and his chief of staff, Marshal Jourdan, but the ambitious marshals effectively operated as independent rulers and listened to nobody in the absence of the emperor. While leading his own campaign from Galicia into neighboring Asturias in May, Ney received the unwelcome news that General Wellesley had defeated Soult at the Battle of Douro on the 12th of May and captured the port city of Porto. Wellesley then marched into Spain, where he won the Battle of Talavera in late July, aided by his Spanish ally, General Cuesta, for which he became Viscount Wellington of Talavera. The British commander lacked the numbers to go into Spain and decided to retreat to Portugal, while Ney was ordered to move his headquarters to Salamanca in western Spain. After returning to Portugal, Wellington decided to adopt a defensive posture and ordered the construction of a series of defences known as the Lines of Torres Vedras, protecting the Portuguese capital of Lisbon. In the spring of 1810, Marshal Massena was given command of the Army of Portugal, consisting of Ney's 6th Corps and Junot's 8th Corps. Ney began operations to besiege Ciudad Rodrigo on the road to Portugal in June, but after a few days, Ney and Massena had a serious disagreement. When Massena threatened to send him back to France, Ney reluctantly complied, and Ciudad Rodrigo duly fell on the 9th of July. As Massena led his 65,000 men into Portugal, the ill-tempered Ney chose to follow his superior's orders to the letter, even if he knew they were mistaken. Thus, on the 27th of September 1810, Ney's columns marched up the ridge at Basaco, where they were easily beaten back. The British commander fell back behind the Lines of Torres Vedras, allowing Massena's army to dwindle through attrition. In March 1811, Massena had only 30,000 men left and decided to retreat to Spain, prompting Wellington to go on the offensive. Ney led the rearguard at Pombal and Redinha, but had to sacrifice the army's supply train in order to save the army. In late March, as Massena sought to retain a foothold in Portugal, Ney refused to obey orders and was sent back to Madrid, from where Napoleon sent him home. After his ill-fated service in Spain, Ney might have expected that his military career would be over, but he was, unbeknownst to him, about to win his greatest glory and honor as a Marshal of the Empire. In 1812, Napoleon decided to go to war against Russia as a result of the Franco-Russian tensions over Poland, and Alexander's decision to trade with Britain in secret. Ney was assigned to command the 3rd Corps of the French army, which had around 38,000 men. The Grande Armée crossed the Niemen on the 24th of June, marking the start of the invasion. The Russian commander, General Mikhail Barclay de Tolly, a Baltic German of Scottish descent, decided to withdraw and join forces with Prince Bagration. As Napoleon advanced, he was keen to ensure that the Russian armies remained separated so he could face Barclay alone in battle. But the Russians continued to retreat, abandoning Vilna, Drissa, and Vitebsk in Belarus. The hot Russian summer took a heavy toll on Napoleon's men and horses, reducing his numbers by a third with hardly a shot fired in anger. Barclay had been joined by Bagration in Smolensk and was persuaded to begin a counter-offensive, but false intelligence prompted him to fall back to the city. While Napoleon hoped to beat the Russians to Smolensk, on the 14th of August, Ney and Murat faced fierce resistance from 7,000 Russians under General Dmitry Nieverovsky near Krasny to the southwest of Smolensk. Barclay sought to avoid battle and prepared to retreat towards Moscow, leaving only a single corps to hold Smolensk. After heavy fighting on the 16th, which led both sides to sustain around 10,000 casualties, the Russians abandoned Smolensk. On the 19th of August, as he marched east from Smolensk, Ney came across a Russian force on the heights near Valutino. This turned out to be General Pavel Tuchkov's hastily assembled rearguard, covering the retreat of the Russian 3rd Corps under his brother Nikolai Tuchkov. Ney and Murat repeatedly attacked the heights but faced strong resistance, while Barclay organized the Russian 3rd Corps to turn back and join the fight at Valutino. The French were unable to capture Valutino until late in the day, when Ney was supported by a division of Davout's corps, led by General Charles-Étienne Gudin, who was mortally wounded. Barclay continued his retreat until the 29th of August, when he was superseded by General Kutuzov, who decided to make his stand at Borodino, some 70 miles to the west of Moscow. On the 5th of September, Davout managed to expel the Russians from their advanced redoubt at Shevardino, on the left of the Russian line. The following day, 120,000 men of the French Grande Armée and a similar number of Russians prepared to do battle the following day. On the morning of the 7th of September, the Battle of Borodino began, as Prince Eugène de Beauharnais, Napoleon's stepson and Viceroy of Italy, led his 4th Corps to drive the Russians out of the village of Borodino. Ney's corps was in the center of the French lines, facing Bagration's 2nd Army near the village of Siemionovska. Ney, Murat, and Davout launched several attacks against Bagration, only to be driven back by fierce Russian counterattacks. While rallying his men, Bagration was struck by an artillery shell and fell mortally wounded. By around noon, Ney was in possession of Siemionovska, and the Russian left fell back towards the north. Ney turned left and supported Viceroy Eugène in his efforts to dislodge the Russians from the Grand Redoubt behind the river Kolochka. After several unsuccessful infantry attacks, French cavalry charged around the rear of the redoubt and captured it. As Murat's troopers swarmed the plain behind the redoubt, General Barclay reformed his line and personally directed his cavalry to counter the exhausted French cavalry, forcing the French to break off. At the end of the day, the Russians lost 40,000 men, while the French sustained 30,000 casualties of their own. In the early hours of the following morning, Kutuzov ordered his army to retreat towards Moscow. While Kutuzov preserved his army to fight another day, the battle, called the Battle of the Moskwa by the French, opened Napoleon's road to Moscow. As a result of Ney's actions, the emperor bestowed upon him the title of Prince of the Moskwa. While Kutuzov evacuated Moscow, Murat's vanguard arrived in the deserted city on the 12th. Napoleon himself arrived on the 14th, but Ney's corps, down to 8,000 men, were ordered to camp west of Moscow, where they soon saw the city engulfed in flames. Napoleon expected to make peace with Tsar Alexander, but the letters he sent to St. Petersburg received no reply. For several days, the French lost contact with Kutuzov, until it was determined that the Russians had made camp on the Kaluga road southwest of Moscow. On the 18th of October, while Ney's Third Corps was being inspected by Napoleon in Moscow, news arrived that Murat's vanguard had been attacked at its camp at Vinkovo, leading Napoleon to decide to leave Moscow. Napoleon hoped to skirt around Kutuzov's camp at Tarutino and reach Kaluga, but on the 24th of October he met the Russians at Malaya Roslovets and failed to break through. The Emperor had to retreat westwards to Smolensk, taking the same road that had been ravaged during the French advance. The retreating Frenchmen faced plunging temperatures, inadequate clothing, very little food, and raids by Cossack horsemen. On the 3rd of November, led by General Mikhail Miloradovich, attacked Vyazma and threatened to cut off Eugene and Davos, and Ney had to intervene to save his comrades. After assuming rearguard duties, Third Corps faced frequent Cossack attacks, and each night hundreds of men froze to death along the road. By the time Ney reached the city on the 14th of August, his Third Corps was down to 3,000 men. He was unable to resupply his men as the corps before him plundered all the stores, and on the 17th, Ney left Smolensk hoping to join up with Davos at Krasny. While the French took on provisions in Smolensk, Kutuzov had overtaken them and lay in wait along the road, hoping to destroy the French corps one by one as they left the city. After leaving Smolensk, Ney found that he was cut off from Davos. When asked to surrender by a Russian officer, Ney responded, "A Marshal of France does not surrender." A shot rang out, and taking advantage of the confusion, Ney arrested the Russian envoy and ordered his men to fire. After half an hour of heavy fighting, Ney managed to escape with 2,000 men, and over the next 2 days, he crossed to the north bank of the Dnieper and beat off Cossack attacks to arrive at Orsha on the 20th of November with his 800 remaining men. His comrades had given him up for lost, and when Napoleon heard the news, he exclaimed, "He is the bravest of the brave." The remnants of the Grande Armée marched towards the Berezina River, where an army of 40,000 men, under Russian Admiral Pavel Chichagov, was bearing in from the south in conjunction with another 40,000 under General Pyotr Wittgenstein from the north. Though Chichagov was on the west bank of the Berezina, he failed to realize that Napoleon was crossing further north on the 26th. Ney could do little with his 600 remaining men, but when Marshal Oudinot was wounded fighting Chichagov on the west bank of the Berezina on the 28th, Napoleon ordered Ney to take command, pushing Chichagov back and keeping the road open for the retreating Frenchmen, of whom 30,000 managed to escape by the 29th. During the final days of the campaign, Ney was once again with the rearguard, retreating to Vilna and Kovna, now Kaunas in Lithuania, where he was among the last to cross the Niemen back into friendly territory. The disastrous Russian campaign shattered the invincible reputation of the Grande Armée. In February 1813, the Prussians joined an alliance with Russia, marking the start of the War of the Sixth Coalition, while the Austrians opted for neutrality. Napoleon hurriedly organized an army of 500,000 men, and Ney's Third Corps was back to 40,000 men, but the vast majority were raw recruits. Napoleon hoped to fight the Russians and Prussians in the familiar ground of southern Germany. At Lutzen on the 2nd of May, Napoleon clashed with the enemy under General Wittgenstein following Kutuzov's death a few days earlier. Ney's corps in the French center came under sustained attack from Prussian infantry and Russian cavalry, but the presence of the Marshal steadied the young conscripts. The momentum swung back and forth, but the arrival of the Imperial Guard and French artillery forced the enemy to retire. Though Napoleon had won the battle, he lacked the cavalry to effectively exploit the victory. 3 weeks later, the Allies stopped their retreat at Bautzen. With around 150,000 men under his command, Napoleon sought to engage the enemy in a frontal attack, while Ney attacked the Allied right at the head of 2 corps to cut off their retreat. The battle began on the 20th of May, and the Allies retreated to the heights behind Bautzen. On the 21st, the battle was going to plan, as Ney's 60,000 men advanced against the 15,000 men under Barclay opposing him. By the middle of the afternoon, Ney was poised to cut the Allied line of retreat, but lost track of his strategic objective and turned to support Soult's attack on the Prussian General Blücher in the center. The Allies immediately recognized the threat and ordered a general withdrawal, allowing Napoleon another technical victory while saving the Allied army from destruction. At the beginning of June, the two sides agreed to an armistice, while peace talks were held under Austrian mediation. When Napoleon rejected the terms offered at the beginning of August, the Austrians declared war on France and joined the Russians and Prussians. The Sixth Coalition's forces were divided into three main armies: the Army of Bohemia in Czechia, under Prince Schwarzenberg, which included 230,000 Austrians, Prussians and Russians; the Army of Silesia in southern Poland, under General Blücher, made up of 110,000 Prussians and Russians; and the Army of the North around Berlin, some 90,000 Prussians and Swedes under Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who had been Crown Prince of Sweden since 1810. Napoleon had 250,000 men available for active operations around Dresden, and he hoped to defeat the Allied armies separately. On the 26th of August, Schwarzenberg attacked General Saucere's corps at Dresden. Napoleon hurried with reinforcements, and Ney led two columns of the Imperial Guard into action. The following day, Napoleon had 100,000 men at Dresden, but decided to go on the offensive. The enemy flanks were broken while Ney pushed forward in the center to complete an unexpected triumph, inflicting more than 40,000 casualties on the enemy at the cost of 10,000 French dead and wounded. Once again, Napoleon failed to exploit the victory, and General Vandamme's corps, which pursued the enemy, was isolated and defeated at Culm on the 29th. In the meantime, Napoleon received news that Oudinot had been defeated by Bernadotte at Grossbeeren in the north on the 23rd of August, while on the 26th, Marshal MacDonald was beaten by Blücher during a chaotic fight in heavy rain at the Katzbach. Keen to avenge Oudinot's defeat, Napoleon placed Ney at the head of 70,000 men to attack Bernadotte and occupy Berlin. On the 6th of September, Ney attacked the Prussians at Dennewitz, but ill feeling between Ney and Oudinot fatally undermined the French cause and led to defeat. While Schwarzenberg and Blücher advanced on Leipzig, Napoleon abandoned Dresden and retreated towards Leipzig, while Ney simultaneously fell back towards the city from the north. Between the 16th and 19th of October 1813, up to 200,000 men of Napoleon's Grande Armée under Napoleon confronted more than 360,000 allies under Schwarzenberg. Ney had resumed command of the Third Corps and played little part during the first and heaviest day of fighting, during which Murat led 5,000 cavalrymen on a daring charge which almost captured the three Allied sovereigns before being beaten back. On the 18th, the third day of battle, Ney and Marshal Marmont valiantly held the northern line against Blücher and Bernadotte, but superior Allied numbers caused the line to collapse late in the day, and the Grande Armée withdrew on the morning of the 19th. Following the defeat at Leipzig, Napoleon decided to abandon Germany and retreated behind the Rhine. During the winter, hundreds of thousands of Allied troops poured into France, while Napoleon barely had 40,000 men, and Ney's part was reduced to the command of a Guards division of 2,500 men. Napoleon's small army proved more mobile, and over 6 days between the 10th and 15th of February 1814, he defeated and reduced Blücher's army in a series of 4 battles. Napoleon's genius was on full display as he sought to fend off both enemy armies in turn. On the 20th of March, Ney offered strong resistance at Arcis-sur-Aube, leading 7,000 men, but the following day's attacks was called off after Napoleon realized he was facing Schwarzenberg's entire force. Napoleon tried to march east to stir up patriotic sentiment in eastern France, but after being informed that the Allies were marching on Paris, he ordered his men to hurry to the capital. Napoleon reached the outskirts of Paris on the 30th, when he learned that Paris had fallen to the Allies. While the Allies were in Paris demanding Napoleon's surrender, the Emperor gathered around him an army of 60,000 men at Fontainebleau and vowed to fight on. On the 4th of April, the marshals who remained with Napoleon collectively agreed that there was no longer any hope, and Ney confronted the Emperor, informing him that he had no choice but to give up his throne. After the marshals collectively refused to march on Paris and subject it to the same fate as Moscow, Napoleon agreed to abdicate in favor of his 3-year-old son, who would become Napoleon II. Ney transmitted this message back to Paris, but the Allies stood firm. Napoleon would have to abdicate unconditionally. The late Louis XVI's younger brother would return to the throne as Louis XVIII, and Napoleon would be exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Tuscany. Ney returned to Fontainebleau on the evening of the 5th to convey the Allied refusal. Napoleon eventually backed down and accepted the terms of defeat. On the 6th of April, Napoleon signed an unconditional abdication, and Ney returned to Paris to declare his loyalty to the new government. In gratitude to Ney's part in persuading Napoleon to abdicate, the new monarch confirmed him as Marshal of France, Prince of Muscoa, and Duke of Elchingen. While Ney hoped to settle down to a quiet life, on the 6th of March 1815, he received an urgent summons to Paris from Marshal Soult, now Louis's Minister of War. The following day, he arrived in the capital to hear that Napoleon had escaped from Elba and landed in southern France. That evening, Ney promised the king that he would bring Napoleon back in an iron cage. As Ney took up his command to block Napoleon's path, he struggled to find men loyal to the king. After unleashing a tirade at the royalists who abandoned their posts, on the 13th of March, Ney received a message from Napoleon's intermediaries with an offer to switch sides. The following day, he announced that he intended to join Napoleon and was met with enthusiastic cries of "Long live the Emperor!" After Napoleon's return to France on the 20th of March, a new coalition was formed, including Austria, Britain, Prussia, and Russia, to remove the emperor from his restored throne. In June 1815, faced with the prospect of more than 600,000 Allied troops invading France, Napoleon decided to march against Wellington and Blücher, each of whom had around 70,000 men. Since his restoration, Napoleon remained suspicious of Ney and did not offer him a command, but at the last minute summoned Ney to his headquarters in Belgium and offered a command. Napoleon had divided his army into 3 groups. Ney's 40,000 men on the left would operate against Wellington's army, while Marshal Grouchy's 40,000 on the right would advance against Blücher's Prussians. Napoleon would have 30,000 men in the center, with the option of joining either Ney or Grouchy as circumstances dictated. On the 16th of June, Ney approached the crossroads at Quatre Bras, where he found some Dutch troops under Wellington's command. Ney did not receive orders to attack until the afternoon, allowing Wellington to send substantial reinforcements. The same day, Napoleon and Grouchy were in the process of defeating the Prussians at Ligny. Ney had been counting on the arrival of General d'Erlon's First Corps and was infuriated when Napoleon ordered d'Erlon to march towards Ligny. D'Erlon marched back and forth without taking part in either battle. Learning of Blücher's defeat at Ligny on the morning of the 17th, Wellington withdrew to a position at Waterloo on the southern approaches to Brussels. After being informed that the Prussians were retreating northeast away from Wellington, Napoleon ordered Grouchy to keep track of the Prussian movements, while he joined Ney to pursue Wellington. Arriving at Waterloo on the morning of the 18th of June, Napoleon waited for his army to form and attacked just before noon, sending his brother Jerome's division against the farm of Hougemont on Wellington's right. Though this was intended to be a diversionary attack, the fighting on the French left gathered intensity throughout the day. Napoleon launched his main assault at Wellington's center, ordering Ney to accompany d'Erlon's 20,000 men, who attacked in 4 large columns. Just as the French columns were reaching the crest of the ridge, General Thomas Picton ordered a counterattack. Though Picton was killed instantly, The British redcoats repelled the French columns, while British heavy cavalry charged all the way to the French lines. As the afternoon wore on, Napoleon saw Prussians approaching from the northeast and sent for Grouchy to join him. In a desperate attempt to break Wellington's lines before the Prussians arrived, Ney led a series of cavalry charges which were all repelled by British infantry squares. By 6 in the evening, the French had captured the farm of La Haie-Sainte in front of Wellington's centre, and Ney requested infantry reinforcements to exploit the breakthrough. With only his guard in reserve, Napoleon refused, but as the Prussians continued to arrive and extended the Allied left, Napoleon ordered Ney to lead the guard for a final assault. The British guards counterattacked, and Ney struggled to rally the men during the intense hand-to-hand fighting. As he tried to reform, he shouted, "Come and see how a Marshal of France can die." But the men soon turned back, and Ney was left stranded. As the British cavalry came crashing down, he found refuge in a square before retiring from the field on foot. A depressed and demoralized Ney had sought death on the battlefield of Waterloo. When Louis XVIII was restored to the throne on the 8th of July, Ney knew that he would most likely be executed for treason. After considering plans to escape to the United States or to Switzerland, Ney received news that the king had signed decrees depriving him of his aristocratic titles and that he would be tried at a court-martial. On the 4th of August, he was arrested at a chateau, where he had taken refuge, and was taken to the Conciergerie prison in central Paris on the 19th. Marshal Moncey was asked to preside over Ney's court-martial but refused, reminding the king of the many French lives that Ney had saved at the Berezina. Marshal Jourdan agreed to preside over Ney's court-martial, which met on the 9th and 10th of November. The court decided that it had no jurisdiction, an outcome that pleased Ney, who thought that his former colleagues would condemn him. The Chamber of Peers took up the case. Ney and his lawyers sought to demonstrate that his defection was not premeditated. Sensing that the court was against his client, during the final session on the 6th of December, Ney's lawyer drew attention to the fact that Saint-Louis had been ceded to Prussia in the Treaty of Paris, signed on the 20th of November, between France and the Allies. But Ney asserted, "I am French and will remain French." At the end of the proceedings, 157 peers decided that Ney was guilty, with only a single vote against, and 137 voted in favor of execution. After bidding farewell to his wife and children the following morning, Ney was taken to the gardens of the Luxembourg Palace. As the firing squad assembled, Ney delivered the fatal order. "Soldiers, when I give the command to fire, fire straight at my heart. Wait for the order. It will be my last to you. I protest against my condemnation. I have fought 100 battles for France, and not one against her. Soldiers, fire." Thus, Marshal Michel Ney met his end in front of a firing squad on the 7th of December 1815, a few weeks before his 46th birthday. He was buried in the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris, where a dozen of his fellow marshals, including Davos and Massena, would later join him. Marshal Ney leaves a legacy as one of the most famous soldiers in French history. The son of a humble cooper from the Franco-German borderlands, Ney was one of many talented officers who rose rapidly up the ranks of the French revolutionary armies in the 1790s. After spearheading Moreau's victory at Hohenlinden in 1800, Ney's destiny was closely tied to Napoleon's star. After being named one of Napoleon's 18 marshals in 1804, Ney was at the emperor's side from the Ulm campaign in 1805 to the victories at Jena and Friedland, which made Napoleon master of Europe. After being stuck in Napoleon's Spanish quagmire, he attained his greatest glory at Borodino and in the infamous retreat of 1812. He was at Napoleon's side during the epic battles against the Sixth Coalition in 1813 and the forlorn defense of France in 1814. Despite helping to secure Napoleon's first abdication, he defected to the emperor in 1815 and joined him in his final defeat at Waterloo, which sealed his fate and condemned him to death. What do you think of Marshal Ney? Was he one of the greatest soldiers in history, whose bravery and determination inspired his men to great deeds, both in victory and defeat? Or was he a second-rate general who often acted without orders and was saved by his comrades on the battlefield? Please let us know in the comment section. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.